especially if you're asking the AI to write your software. A
Yeah.
simple program, it can do. But if you're trying to tell it to rewrite OpenSSL or the Linux kernel, it's going to fall over within minutes. It can't handle the complexity. It doesn't have the ability to have that context. So as students need to be versed in kind of what the technologies are, but then leaning back into your cybersecurity discipline, principle of least privilege. What data are you sharing? Who are you sharing it? When and how are you sharing it? And that's one of the big fall downs with a lot of these models is people don't understand that these are oftentimes shared resources where, again, the whole school potentially shares this model, or they might have carved off into different pieces, but you're sharing that with other people. Any data you're putting in there is potentially viewable, and definitely you could trick the model into sharing something it shouldn't share with other people that aren't necessarily authorized.
Hey there, hope you're all doing well. This is Griswold of FINOS. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention to you a little bit about our sponsors of OSFF. We could not do this conference. This conference is really expensive. It's really expensive to do it in New York City and the other one in London as well. So without our sponsors, this would not be possible. The majority of our members actually attend our conferences for free because of these sponsors. Keep that in mind, but I want you to listen to one of our speakers that you're going to listen to next. But I also want you to just take a minute to either go to the website and check out our sponsors or visit them when you come to OSFF. The majority of them will have booths there. They'll be walking around. They'll have swag. But I want to mention them. Some of them actually have tracks, like the Confidential Computing Consortium. They have an entire track on security that they're going to be curating with us. FinOps Foundation, they will be there walking around. Kevin Anami and Steve Trask and JR Stormont will be there. Red Hat, great member, great leader, sponsor. We appreciate everything they do. Our contributor sponsors are GitLab, OpenSSF. They will have a half track on security as well. Splunk, Temporal, and vCluster. And then finally, our community sponsors are Capital One, Gradle, Interop.io, Juxt, Causley, the Linux Foundation Education side, Modern, OpenLogic by Perforce, Oracle, Sauce Labs, CO Security, Solo.io, Sonotype, SUSE, Synadia, and Tetrate. Again, please visit our sponsors at their booths. Please visit their websites. And if you have any questions about them or how to sponsor, please let us know. OSFF@finos.org. All right, with that, I'll let you get to the rest of the podcast. Thanks so much.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Griswold of FINOS. Hope you're doing well. Today, I have a new friend in the house. This is CRob. CRob is from OpenSSF. CRob, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yourself today, Grizz?
I'm doing wonderful.
Good.
This is actually my last work thing for the day. So
I get to talk to Australia later, so it's not my last thing.
I love Australia. I used to live there. It's a beautiful place, and I do not want to correspond with anybody while I'm on the east coast of the U.S. from Australia anymore. So I wish you luck with that.
Thank you, sir.
CRob is, and I will say, Christopher Robinson, CRob is going to be speaking at the Open Source and Finance Forum. And I already told CRob that I am going to screw up so many different acronyms here because, like I said, he works for the OpenSSF, the Security Software Foundation. And anyway, there's a lot of acronyms all the way through the LF that we could go into, but we won't. But I really want to talk about you. I want to talk about, you told me that tomorrow is your 1 year full anniversary as employee at OpenSSF. So how'd you get here?
Let me tell you, 3,000 years ago, I actually worked in a super regional bank for 7 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Nice.
so I led the web security team, and then I got, air quotes, promoted, and I ended up owning all the distributed Unix, Linux for the organization,
Nice.
which was a treat. So I got to do that for 7 years. And that's really where I got into cybersecurity as a discipline. And from there, it's been wonderful. I've had an amazing journey along the way. But today, I'm the Chief Security Architect / Chief Technology Officer for the Open Source Security Foundation. We're a project of the LF, just like my friends over at FINOS. And we are the subject matter experts in application security, infrastructure, CI security, and now AI security broadly for the whole LF. So I get to do a lot of consulting with the sister and brother organizations around. And this is a collection of the industry's cybersecurity experts. And we have some pretty amazing things we do. We've been an organization for about 5 years now. We just had our birthday back in August. And yes, October 1st, 2024 was my first day as an actual employee. I got to be a volunteer for 4 years. And then I had the privilege to come on board as an employee and get to do this full time and help make the community go fast.
That's pretty cool. And we'll probably get into this later or maybe on another podcast. But interesting that you talk about being a volunteer that ends up becoming a paid employee. That I always started with the volunteer mentality that leads to something that, oh, sure, that ends up being something that I do. That's how I've gotten to wherever the heck I am now. And that's pretty cool because that's a cool origin story as far as I'm concerned within open source. And there are many stories like that, but that's awesome to actually talk to somebody who started that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's really interesting that actually it was this financial institution that got me on the path for open source, because at the time the bank was interested in saving money, reducing their expenses and complexity of the network. And Linux was that play on how we edged out proprietary Unix, because for feature, it offered the same or better delivery of features faster and at a quarter of the cost. And that's really where that got me started. And I've been extremely happy to be able to participate in open source for the last 15 or so years.
Almost as long as open source has been around. Yeah. Ian, I do want to talk about you too, but it's interesting that if you were at a regional retail bank that long ago, that was very forward thinking.
Yes. Yeah, and they really embraced it because they recognized Linux was a little scary, the hippie cowboys out on the fringe, but the bank recognized the fact that, again, feature for feature, it's delivering the same things. We had the ability to augment and write our own software, contribute back, or go up and talk to the maintainer upstream or our distribution provider to influence things that helped us achieve our business goals.
That's pretty cool. And obviously I have lived in this banking world for 8-9 years now and trying to understand. And listeners to this program have heard me say it before that I was working on open source conferences 15 years ago. And we did a lot of raw open source back then. And then we got to a point to where there's a conference called All Things Open that I helped.
Yeah.
And Todd and I, we got to a point where, hey, we don't have to say raw or open source. We can just go, here's how you do it. And then I came into this world, in the banking world, and I was like, what the hell? We're back to raw open source. So that's why I do say that if it was 15 years ago, to understand that, and maybe it was just more on the consumption side, to understand that, because honestly, FINOS doesn't work with many regional banks, and we don't work with much retail right now. It's mostly capital markets, buy side, sell side. And so again, I would, after this is over, I want you to tell me who it was, because it's pretty astounding to me.
Yeah. And we had a very large investment in developers. So at the time we had hundreds of developers, which pales in comparison to some of the largest national, international banks. But they truly embraced the fact that they were a technology company that also helped people achieve their financial dreams. Awesome. And that's through that development, they were able to distinguish themselves, and they were more agile than some of their competitors to be able to quickly deliver features or incorporate new technologies like the cloud or whatever else it might have been at the time.
So we'll come back to the bank story, but let's talk about you. What happened next?
I got the opportunity to go work for Red Hat. First as a technical account manager, and then I was lured away by one of my mentors. He tried to trick me into taking over his job as a chief security officer at an insurance company. A really great guy. Love him. I learned a lot, but I also learned I never want to be a CISO. As a terrible job. And I told him it's a terrible job. And then I had the opportunity to go back to Red Hat, where I joined the product security team. So I got to do upstream open source coordinated vulnerability disclosure at a global scale through working with Red Hat. And that was an amazing experience. And that's really where I blossomed into the person you're talking to today, where I have these connections around the world. And I talk with, researchers and people within large and small environments and academics and students. It's just been, I truly love the open source ecosystem, and I love the people that show up every day and try to add value.
Yeah. No, I definitely found through the past, 15 years of doing this as well, that there's a reason why I keep getting drawn back into it. And it has everything to do with people actually wanting to, maybe not always altruistic, but try to do good.
Yep, absolutely.
And in any industry that you're in, it's going to happen, even in financial services.
And even if you think about like cybersecurity practitioners, which is my little slice of the internet, historically, we have been much more open and helpful to each other behind closed doors because we understand it's a really hard job and it's super stressful, a lot going on. So we constantly are sharing best practices and tips and tricks with each other. And it's just, that's exactly what the open source is. So it was a real simple transition for me from cyber into the pure upstream, because again, everybody shows up. I have an idea and I'm going to donate this software to the world because I think it might help somebody else. I love that kind of collaboration.
No, definitely. My son, junior in college and attempting to go into cybersecurity himself.
good.
And I feel that's what he's starting to experience more and more as he's getting into more of his cybersecurity classes, and the people that he's working at University of South Carolina. And like, I think he's starting to see that collaboration as well. So it's nice to hear that it's at all levels.
And it's what I love is that there is pride and ego, but broadly, if someone has a question, the security community and the upstream community generally is very accepting and willing to try to help somebody where they are, help them learn and better themselves. I love that.
Cool. That's cool. That's something that a weird parallel, maybe not so weird, that I found that especially when my son was more into skateboarding and everything, skateboarding community was like that. And to compare is, oh, that's an awesome trick. How did you do that? Here's how I did it. And here's everything that I have to do in order to get ready to do it. And I'm just going to assume that security is like that as well.
It's very much. So I've been mentoring both practitioners and students for decades. And again, I used to teach CISSP boot camps. So I've been an instructor. I do a lot of education work in our foundation. And it's just, I truly believe it's my obligation as a security practitioner to help build up the next generation, help things get better after I decide to get out someday.
Good. We all need that for sure. And now I know exactly what I'm going to ask you at the end. So go ahead and what happened next?
What happened next after Red Hat?
After Red Hat the second time.
Yeah, after Red Hat the second time, I got there was a large cybersecurity event called Spectre Meltdown that at the time it was a CPU processor problem. And because I was on the open source end of things, I helped coordinate from the researchers and the big people that started the problem. I got to help read in the rest of upstream and like the distros and a lot of different vendors. So because of that got me an opportunity to go work at Intel for a couple of years, where I was the director of security communications. We did a podcast there, and basically I helped coach them in interactions with open source projects, but also helped them build materials and training for as we were releasing security disclosures, to making sure that all the documentation and the training and whatever else, the patches were all in place so that when things went public, everybody had access to that. So that was a lot of fun. And then again, from there, I had already been working at volunteering at the OpenSSF as part of Red Hat. And I continued that with Intel. And then the opportunity arose last summer that I was able to, a position open, and I was able to come be the security architect here.
Cool. So what do you do on a daily?
What do I do? Well, my shtick is I don't do anything. I read and I write, but I'm not a coder. I don't configure infrastructure. I don't deploy servers. So I don't do anything. There are people that do stuff and they add a lot of value. I'm behind the scenes. I'm a cheerleader. I help provide the perspective of the business and how to manage risk and think through how to solve problems. So I do a lot of that. I get to, within our community, I get to work with all of our members and our contributors and try to help them massage their ideas and present them in the best possible light, help get them more contributors or more resources. And then we also, part of our mission is we do a lot of public policy and ecosystem engagement, work with global governments. We're really involved with the European Union right now with the Cyber Resilience Act, which is a big law coming down the pipe that'll go into effect next year in October. There's some reporting requirements, but then the law goes fully into effect December 2027. So I'm doing a lot of education and guidance and documentation and kind of negotiation with everybody, talking about how people can be compliant with this law.
So let's talk about your talk.
Let's talk about my talk. Yeah, I'm really excited about this. Again, I've been a long time listener, first time caller with FINOS. I've been observing the foundation from afar. We do a lot, like today, my group partners with a lot of folks from over in the FINOS space. So again, there's a lot of collaboration. And that really comes up from the fact that financial institutions have so many compliance obligations, and it's in their best interest to try to streamline their operations and try to maximize when I implement a control to give it the maximum applicability everywhere. And so that's why I'm really excited to join the conference in New York. And I get to talk about, I believe the talk is Communication Very Erratic. And it's talking about some changes within the vulnerability disclosure and vulnerability management space over the last year that have really disrupted a lot of operations, both for upstream maintainers, but predominantly for downstream organizations that have legal and regulatory obligations that they have to be proving that they're doing vulnerability management effectively. And the current system has had some, we'll call it generously, opportunities in the last year and a half, 2 years, that have hindered blue team defenders' ability to be able to effectively manage their risk when it comes to vulnerabilities.
And if you also look at, okay, so the talk is called Communications Very Erratic, Stabilizing Vulnerability Data for Downstream. And by the way, nice dad joke on the CVE.
Thank you.
Being a different type of CVE. Not everybody who listens to this show understands security. They probably understand the severity of things, understand the importance of it, but they understand how risk from security affects regulatory concerns, which then affects pocketbooks. This is in the security track for us, obviously. Is there any type of primer that you could give on, without saying the actual talk, just what would somebody, as they walk out, be taking away from your talk? And is there anything they need to know going in? What type of level talk? Who should attend this talk?
I would say everybody should attend the talkers. But in particular, if you have anything to do with managing risk within your organization, if you work within the bank or the institute's OSPO, which is the Open Source Program Office, if you are a business kind of product owner, maybe you own the online banking system, for example, you have, whether it's Sarbanes-Oxley or Grammar-Leach-Bliley or PCI, there's a lot of rules and laws and things that you need to comply to. I've been an educator most of my life, so I feel you don't have to have a high bar of knowledge. I think I'll go through and set the stage and give the context. Yeah. But broadly, as an organization that holds your customers' data, and financial data in particular is super sensitive, it's your obligation to protect that data. And sometimes it's you report to the Federal Reserve or the OCC or FIDC. And there's a lot of different bodies involved, but you have somebody that you need to report out to. And part of those obligations that you are beholden to are, do you have a program that understands when there are vulnerabilities reported? Can you assess that within your network very quickly? And can you respond and either deploy a patch that fixes it or some type of mitigation to stop it from happening? Put it behind a firewall or turn the system off, whatever the particular instance might be. And essentially everybody in financial services has some type of awareness about this, which I really in my formative years of coming up as an engineer and eventually an architect, it was super helpful to live in that space. That the fact that you had all these rules you had to follow, and they were slightly different depending on what the line of business was or who the regulatory body was. But broadly, they all boil down to some essential application security and operational management practices. And we'll talk about some of this. We'll talk about these systems that help support the blue teams, the defenders, to be able to execute on this, being able to find and understand vulnerabilities and then fix them. And then we'll talk about some solutions we're talking about across the ecosystem with a lot of different stakeholders on how we potentially could get more information, in particular about upstream open source, plugged into the system to allow downstream and particularly enterprises to be able to evaluate the security practices of these upstream projects and also make informed decisions of, hey, there's a vulnerability. I probably need to react to this very quickly and keep helping supply that authoritative information.
And we have the Confidential Computing Consortium
Yes.
there, and then we have OpenSSF. And so, would you know enough about the two organizations that I tried to pigeonhole things as to OpenSSF more on the policy side and more the software supply chain, whereas CCC, not the other CCC that we deal with, but the Confidential Computing Consortium deals more with what would be the difference between, because we have two security tracks and go ahead.
So from my perspective, the OpenSSF represents application security, supply chain security, and now AI security. We've really greatly accelerated that capability over the last year. The CCC, the Confidential Compute Consortium, predominantly is talking about a subset of security. And these are things generally secure enclaves where you have a trusted compute node in the cloud, and there are certain protections and guarantees you can have of confidentiality, that someone isn't able to sneak in and look at the data or change the data. And that's where, so if a financial institution was deploying cloud services into one of the hyperscalers, they would want to put that into one of these trusted compute environments, things like TDX, SGX, and the equivalents on the AMD and other technology sides. But basically, it's like a magic box that helps protect everything in the cloud. You could do it on site as well. You could do it on your laptop, but it's basically all traffic inside is managed and protected, and you're not going to be leaking information. Whereas our story is a little bit more broader, speaking to how to write better software, how to make better choices when you're picking components and dependencies. And then as particular technologies arise, whether it's AI or kind of an upstream package repository, we have guidance on how to help you through that.
Gotcha.
So they're related, but the CCC is a super specific use case. And you'll see a lot of use with blockchain, kind of Bitcoin-y type things will be in there, a lot of secure processing. So potentially things like the SWIFT system that manages bank-to-bank transactions. Those are, I don't know it for a fact, but I would suspect that those are running on trusted TEE enclaves that kind of protect that confidentiality and integrity of the data moving through it.
Okay, cool. Thank you for the explanation. It makes my life a lot easier when I'm trying to actually promote these two things at the same time. Before we go, I kind of want to go into, just because you're almost forced to, AI.
Yeah.
And not necessarily AI policy best practices on the AI security. I want to go into and then I'm thinking about, as my son's going through his journey right now, that, he's growing up in a totally different time than you did coming through. And I think about too, like the different at his school, and I'm not going to say the name of the company, but they just got licenses to actually use a particular AI chat feature that is licensed throughout the entire school, no matter what college you're in there. And I thought that was interesting because, of course, he was using mine before that and helping with his learning how to code better and things like that. Because I checked and made sure that there wasn't cheating going on. But then, like, my daughter's school as a high schooler, they got rid of Grammarly recently because it has AI connected with it. And she's going into architecture, he's in cybersecurity, but I want to talk on the cybersecurity side and AI as a practitioner, what's going to be the baseline for somebody coming out of school with into cybersecurity, knowing that AI can do a lot of it potentially? Yeah, exactly. Same. It happens in marketing too. I use it a lot. Obviously, there are things that I have to input versus output. But for some, as you're thinking about students coming through, and what do you think is going to be the baseline? What do you think that they're going to have to encounter? Just, I don't even want to say the next 5 years, because I think that's mind blowing where we might be by then. So let's talk about
There's
a year or two.
there's a lot to know and do. And from our perspective, and you talk to an actual AI person, they'll argue with me, but they're wrong. AI development is development. So we have 30 or 40 years of application security best practices and learning and tools that can be leaned into. So as a student going in, there's a lot in cybersecurity. I used to teach the CISSP, and we would say that the knowledge is a mile wide, an inch deep. So going into cyber, you need to have at least a surface level understanding of a lot of different technologies and a lot of different ways of doing things. And unfortunately, AI brings in some complicated nuances, but a large part of it can be covered by traditional cybersecurity application security techniques and learnings and tools. Now, there are some nuances because we don't typically deal with training models or the fact that models hallucinate or lie to you, this type of stuff. So again, you have that kind of untrustworthy actor you're interacting with sometimes.
Yeah.
But what I would recommend to students is there are every week, I think some new AI technologies being introduced. Like I was stunned when we were in Amsterdam and there were so many announcements around agentic, which is basically decomposing an AI application and specializing these little agents, these little programs to go do particular tasks to interact with a particular model or some kind of workflow. But so students need to have a kind of a base level understanding of what the current state of the art is. They need to be constantly reading and learning. Chat bots are effective tools, but you need to trust them with a healthy degree of skepticism. I view them as a junior engineer or a junior security person. They're great at looking through high volume of information and then summarizing things for you. But if you're actually asking it to do very complex tasks or being super creative on something, that's when they tend to fall down, especially if you're asking the AI to write your software. A simple program, it can do. But if you're trying to tell it to rewrite OpenSSL or the Linux kernel, it's going to fall over within minutes. It can't handle the complexity. It doesn't have the ability to have that context. So as students need to be versed in kind of what the technologies are, but then leaning back into your cybersecurity discipline, principle of least privilege. What data are you sharing? Who are you sharing it? When and how are you sharing it? And that's one of the big fall downs with a lot of these models is people don't understand that these are oftentimes shared resources where, again, the whole school potentially shares this model, or they might have carved off into different pieces, but you're sharing that with other people. Any data you're putting in there is potentially viewable, and definitely you could trick the model into sharing something it shouldn't share with other people that aren't necessarily authorized. So having that kind of understanding of those core cyber principles is going to serve them well, kind of understanding least privilege, confidentiality, integrity, availability, those types of classic cyber things. And that's where my interactions with FINOS is banks really understand this. They've used, it wasn't called artificial intelligence back then. It was called machine learning, basically with where you would have, it's not the trust system, it's fraud detection, where they would use these systems to go through and comb through patterns of logs and data and identifying these patterns. That's broadly what AI does at its core. And so banking's been using this for a long time. And that's why I enjoy the times I get to work with the FINOS folks around AI security in particular, because they get it. They understand the fact that you need to jail this thing off and manage how data is getting into and out of it. And especially they're super sensitive about being able to exfiltrate data. Because again, that's the organization's bread and butter is protecting the client data inside.
And that, we obviously have security initiatives within FINOS,
Sure do.
but we lean heavily on OpenSSF, and then we do have members that are in both, and say, but yeah, this is interesting that you go back to principles, even when you talk about new technology, and that seems very healthy.
Again, AI is, again, there's different techniques. So it's not like a complete reusing everything. But again, the fundamentals of understanding where's the most important data, who has access to it, how it's manipulated, and how you're protecting it, this is all kind of bread and butter that you need to understand going in there, which is, again, why I get into arguments with pure AI technologists. And they say AI is totally different. And I said, show me, prove it to me. Yes, you're piping data to a video card. So again, that's more of a network architecture and a communication workflow. And again, I can apply some network protections there, but it's still, yes, you're talking to your GPU from the CPU. And there's some different workflows, there's some different techniques, but 80% of it is classic cybersecurity.
It's interesting. There are definitely times where I think we're going one direction, and the guest is going to tell me, yeah, we're going to go down this road and everything, and everything's future facing. But there have been a couple of times recently, like this one and one previous, that it just came down to do the right work and continue to do it well. It almost sounds, again, I think that is healthy, and maybe that's a weird word for this, but healthy in as we experience so much chaos, it feels like, on a daily basis.
And what we've recognized about AI, and this is go back about 10 years when everybody was installing data lakes and all this other nonsense, and you would have low code, no code was a big movement where you would allow a business analyst or a business person to write software with this kind of GUI type interface. And that was a whole different set of people participating in development as opposed to your traditionally trained software engineers. And AI is the exact same thing, is where we have a lot of different personas that have never had any cyber training, have never had any development training. And then they're just business people. They're there doing a job and they're talking to the chat bot, asking it questions and telling it to do things. And it's going you're not coming in with the mindset you need to effectively engineer an effective, efficient system or protect it.
Yeah, no, and to all of you out there that are vibe coding, you should probably check to make sure that your code is actually secure, because it's probably not. It's probably
We just
not.
wrote a guide about that, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Good. We can put that on when we put this on YouTube. So cool. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Grizz.
I'm looking forward to meeting you in person. I feel like I've actually met you probably, 1,000 years.
Probably. I'm on the internet a lot.
Yeah. I try not to be. No,
I get to be.
yeah, exactly. But if we have already met, then we will meet again. And I want to make sure I get this right, because there are a couple other things within the OpenSSF is a half track. First, there's securing the future of open source AI, a holistic approach. That's by Jamie Thomas from IBM. There's all about that baseline, charting the path for secure open source projects. Michael Lieberman from Kusari and Stephen Augustus from Bloomberg.
Yep.
And then, like I said, there's CRob, Communications Very Erratic, CVE, stabilizing vulnerability data for downstream. So that is all contained on Wednesday, October 22nd, starting at 11 a.m. and going through 2:20-ish. Definitely come and see CRob's talk, see the rest of the OpenSSF talks as well. I assume one of the things I like about our conference that I also liked when we were building All Things Open was all of our speakers have been very accessible and answer questions.
Right.
Not just from stage, but I'm hoping that you're able to stick around.
Absolutely. No. And that's, I think, as a speaker at a conference, I think it's an obligation to help people understand and rationalize your talk. And so I absolutely love the audience interaction afterwards.
Very good. CRob, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Looking forward to it. And with that, I'm going to say good day, good night, wherever you are. And thank you.
Cheers.